To answer a few questions I've received here recently, guys. Can you get a guy to play the boundary side who's not a natural boundary side X-aligned wide receiver? Stick with me, guys, and I'll answer that question for you. What's up, Eagles Nation? What's going on, NFL World? How you doing, Division Rivals? This is Stephen Hyder with KCD Sports Channel. The Sports Channel where the cerebral NFL fan comes for about 10 minutes of daily content. Hey, guys, if I can ask y'all to do a huge favor before we jump into today's video. If you end up liking this content today, if I can just ask you to do one thing for me, hit that subscribe button. If you're not subscribing to my OG subscribers on this channel, guys, you already know what I'm going to ask you to do. Hit that thumbs up button. It's how we can spike the algorithm to push this out to other people. And get videos like today, which is a community-inspired question. A lot of you guys have been asking me this question, which is, Steve, do you have to go get a traditional X, a boundary side X-aligned wide receiver to play that role, or can you get by with different guys? The answer is complex because to some extent it has a lot to do with the type of system you're running, to be honest. But truth be told, teams get by every day by using guys that you or I probably would not recognize as being true boundary side X-aligned wide receivers. And even today's game, it's changing because there are guys that we would consider, 5, 6, 7 years ago to be clearly, would be your boundary side X-aligned receivers who kind of act more as these movement pieces that play the tall slot, the boundary side, and even a little bit on the flanker. A great example would be Keenan Allen of the Chargers, guys, who is one of these movement pieces who's a tall guy that can do that. And I think this draft class has another guy like that in Justin Ross of Clemson, if that injury is good with the vertebrae. He had surgery there. I don't know if it was an injury per se. So in today's video, I want to talk about, you got guys like DeVonta Smith, right? You have these dudes that come across the league that, DeVonta Smith being an extreme example of this because he's beyond just light. I mean, he's like light for any position at wide receiver, to be quite honest. But there are certain dudes that are they're so good at the release off the line of scrimmage. They just win in their routes, guys. It doesn't matter that they're not these crazy 80-inch wingspan, 215-plus pound guys that can really get out there with those strong hands and catch the ball in contested windows. They create separation that allows them to use maybe a slightly shorter wingspan to get the football. And I would not underlook one key fact, guys. DeVonta Smith has a very strange, lanky body, where he's got like a 77, 78-inch wingspan, which you wouldn't expect from him. But he's got a much larger wingspan than what you would think. So think like James Washington. There's a few guys out there that maybe aren't the biggest dudes in the world in terms of either their weight or their height, which James Washington, DeVonta Smith, completely different examples of those two things, but have tremendous length and reach and are just really nuanced route runners that create separation at the top of the route stem. So that way, even when they're playing in more of a smaller area, because they're such a good route runner, they win. So the question being is, if you got a DeVonta Smith and you're trying to find the best way of using guys like Quez Watkins, DeVonta Smith, and you can't get a true boundary side wide receiver from this draft class, and that's assuming that we're going draft class for this exact role, and I do think that's a good possibility, then what do you do? If you're the Philadelphia Eagles, Steve, or if you're on the coaching staff, like, how would you approach that? And the real answer is you have to find players that are basically deemed 3-level athletes or 3-level receivers. Just basically means that they can work that short, the intermediate, and then the deep area of the field, and they give you all those versatility, all those abilities. It's what made DeVonta Smith such an attractive, prospect last year in the draft class, is that he has this crazy, weird, lanky kind of frame to him. He's a really good route runner, and then he just really understood how to beat man coverage and also sit down inside of his zone. You have to look for guys that have similar traits. I'm not expecting any of these dudes to be quite as successful as DeVonta Smith was right from the jump. You don't want to put that kind of expectation on guys. But can you find traits? And that's where it becomes tough, right? Because I can tell you, in my opinion, the guy that makes the most sense in terms of you can play him at all three spots, just like you can play DeVonta Smith at all three spots, just like Quez Watkins can play all three alignments for a wide receiver. To me, it's Garrett Wilson of Ohio State. He's the guy that is a tremendous route runner. This guy creates separation from the way he runs routes. He can release off the line of scrimmage. He knows how to sit down in zone. He's definitely a 3-level player, meaning he can hit you in the short, the intermediate, or the deep passing area. And just to define that, guys, short is anything from the line of scrimmage to the 9 yards. Intermediate's between 10 and 19 yards, and deep is anything over 20, guys. He can work all three levels of that. He gives you some versatility where you can catch stuff even behind the line of scrimmage. Those quick outs and things like that, guys. I mean, he can do those tunnel screens and the wide receiver screens, the bubble screens. He can do all those type of things, guys. He can give you all that kind of flexibility, if you will. So to begin with, Garrett Wilson, to me, like that's just the obvious one to give you. He's a guy that I would definitely expect the Eagles to have interest in if he's still available in that mid-first round. If he's still floating around there, and I don't know that that's a true statement I'm making, guys, but it is a possibility. And if that's happening, I could see that happening, to be quite honest. So the second guy I would put on this list, this is someone you guys are going to love, but it's complex. I think he can play. He can play at all three depths, okay? He can play that short, he can play that intermediate, he can play the deep. But I'm going to tell you right now, guys, I would judge him to be a little bit more of a slot, and I'm a little skeptical of his ability to play all three alignments, including the boundary, but he is a very good route runner, to be quite honest. I don't think his route running is to Garrett Wilson's level, and I don't think it's to the guy I'm going to name after him. But I do think that he is very dependable in the hands department. This dude just does not put footballs on the ground. It is Penn State's own Jahan Dotson, who, to me, the young man just works all three levels. The question's going to be, can he play all three alignments? I know he can play the slot. I know I could probably definitely use him as a flanker. The question would be is, can he release good enough off the line of scrimmage? And that's what he has to show us versus man coverage, because I think that's the gray area of his film. I wasn't overly confident in projecting that, guys, and you will see when I put out my draft guide. It's coming this week. Just be ready. The offensive part of that draft guide will be this week. It will be up for you guys. That's the area I have questions with. Can he release first man press coverage? Especially on the boundary, if I'm Jahan Dotson. But he definitely can work all three phases, so that's a guy that I think there is some potential in the scenario in which we're painting today. The last guy I'll put out there is John Metchie from Alabama. John Metchie is another one of these guys that, because he tore his ACL, it meshes up a little bit. I don't have him as graded as highly as I do with Garrett Wilson, because I do think that John Metchie, when you break down his film, he can be a little bit more of a body catcher, and I think that can lead you into some issues with drops and playing in contested windows. But he's a very, very good route runner, guys. This dude was tremendous versus man coverage. When they went man on John Metchie, he punished people for it. He was a really good football player at Alabama before that ACL injury, guys. He's a guy that if you're looking for three levels, right? The short, the intermediate, the deep, he just makes sense to me, guys. He makes a ton of sense to me. Now, the question will be, because he's a body catcher, if you put him on the boundary, although he's creating some separation, if said separation doesn't happen, number one, and I don't know the answer to this yet, guys, we have to look this up and see, what is his physical measurements? Does he have that lanky frame to still, even though he's maybe a little bit thin on the frame, and I don't think he's as thin as some of the other prospects that we've seen come out, but he's definitely not a 215-plus guy. Can he start learning how to catch the ball a little bit away from his body, right? Can he become a little bit more of a hands catcher instead of a body catcher, right? Because that is your fear if you're dealing with a guy that's out there on the boundary. You don't want to be a guy that maybe you don't have the greatest wingspan in the world. You're already maybe a little light to play out there, but it's not ridiculous. And then on top of that, you're a body catcher, right? So those are the three guys I would look at in the scenario you guys are asking me, is who would be those guys. Garrett Wilson is the obvious choice. That's the guy that makes the most sense in that role. Jahan Dotson, if you're picking in the early second or back round of the first round, makes a ton of sense. He's a guy that I know for a fact can play three levels. I know he can be all three levels, but can he do all three alignments? I don't know. I'd take a shot at it. And then the third guy, because he's coming off an ACL, if I'm staying still in the second round, and that guy's still on the board, I would probably take a shot at John Metchie to play that role. I mean, yeah, he's a bit of a body catcher. He is. You're going to have to work with that, man. But the way he runs routes and the way that he beats guys, it just shows how good Alabama is at teaching these guys how to run routes. That's my answer, guys. Those are the three guys that I think are three-level, kind of receivers who might also potentially. There's no guarantees. I think Garrett Wilson is definitely a three-alignment guy, but I think the other two guys are a little bit more debatable. But those are the three guys I would give you, okay? Garrett Wilson, Jahan Dotson, John Metchie. That would be my answer for non-traditional boundary side X receivers who might be able to get the job done to pair with a DeVonta Smith and a Quez Watkins to be able to move them all around the formation with Zach Pascal, by the way, too, because you got to factor Zach Pascal into that equation as well. So those are the guys that I would talk about as three-level receivers and maybe potentially having a lot of alignment versatility. All right, guys, I appreciate y'all's time and attention watching this video. As you exit out, guys, please don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed and you enjoy this content, hit that subscription button, guys. And I appreciate y'all so much, and I'll see y'all on the next video.